Now you can't go anywhere. You will sit at home with the child and serve my son." The mother-in-law gloated. When I saw 2 stripes, she secretly switched my pills to ruin my career. But when we went together for our first ultrasound, what the doctor showed us on the screen made my mother-in-law lose consciousness and my husband shake with fear. Hello, dear listeners. If you like my stories, please subscribe to the channel, like it, and let me know in the comments what country you're listening to me from. I always find it very interesting to read this. And now, enjoy listening. Marina loved her life. At 34 years old, she has achieved what many of her peers could only dream of: the position of head of the marketing department in a large wine tea company. Spacious 2-room apartment with panoramic windows in a prestigious area of St. Petersburg. Bought with her own money before marriage. And, as it seemed to her, her loving husband was nearby. Life was planned out years in advance. A couple more years of hard work, the launch of a new international project, and then we can. Think about children. This clear, well-thought-out strategy gave her a sense of control and confidence in the future. Kirill seemed to accept her rules of the game. 35-year-old freelance photographer, he rarely burdened himself with commissions, preferring to spend his days in creative pursuits, which mostly consisted of browsing photo blogs and lazy strolls around the city with an expensive camera around his neck. A camera, by the way, bought with Marina's money. She did not reproach him. Her salary was more than enough for both of them, and Kirill's gentle, slightly infantile character created an atmosphere of calm in the house. He didn't argue, easily agreed with her opinion, and admired her successes, at least in words. "Marish, are you late today?" he asked that evening when she returned from work and was unpacking her bag in the hallway. He was lying on the couch in the living room, scrolling through his phone feed. "The usual," she replied, taking off her stiletto heels. "We're launching a new product. This is the biggest ripoff yet. Did you recognize it?" "No, I was waiting for you. Mom stopped by and brought her signature cutlets." Marina mentally caught herself. Visits from her mother-in-law, Tamara Pavlovna, were always a test for her. The 60-year-old pensioner, a former literature teacher, had a talent for turning any conversation into a veiled lecture on the wrongness of Marina's life. She entered their apartment, shining with frequency, and immediately found a speck of dust on the shelf. "I tried thee." Dinner Marina had prepared and noted with a sigh that Kiryusha, with his delicate stomach, needed something more dietary. "Good evening, Marinochka." Tamara Pavlovna's voice came from the kitchen. She came out, wiping her hands on a towel, as if she were the mistress of the place. "My girl is completely overworked. She is pale and has circles under her eyes. Is this life for a woman?" "Hello, Tamara Pavlovna." "It's just fatigue," Marina smiled politely. "Lots of work." "Work is not like a wolf that won't run away into the forest," her mother-in-law said admonishingly, casting a critical glance at her figure. "But the clock is ticking. You're already 34. At my age, my Kiryusha was already going into 1st grade. This was her favorite topic. Marina learned to ignore these reproaches. They came to an agreement with Kirill. Career first, children later. At least that's what she thought. "We'll get everything done," she said, walking into the bathroom. When she came out, Tamara Pavlovna was already getting ready to leave. Kirill fussily helped her put on her coat. "You, son, keep an eye on her," she said in a loud whisper, nodding towards the bathroom. "Doesn't take care of himself at all. Women's health is fragile. And you still have to give birth to heirs." Marina pretended not to hear. After her mother-in-law left, she went into the bedroom to change. Her cosmetic bag was lying on the dressing table, and something about it was wrong. The zipper was slightly open. Marina frowned. She clearly remembered that she had closed it tightly in the morning. She opened her cosmetic bag. Everything was in place: lipstick, powder, mascara, and a blister pack of her birth control pills. He lay on top as if he had just been placed there. A strange premonition made her take the package in her hands. She had been taking these pills for several years, as prescribed by her doctor, and knew every detail of the packaging. She turned the blister over in her hands. Everything seems to be as usual. Perhaps it just seemed that way. In the evening before going to bed, she took out a pill as always. Kirill was already asleep, turned away from the wall. Marina swallowed a small pea, washed it down with water, and looked at her husband. Lately he has become somehow different, more silent, thoughtful. Sometimes she caught his strange, searching gaze on her. When she asked what was wrong, he just waved her off. Yes, that's what I was thinking. That evening, as she lay down to sleep, she didn't know that her well-established and predictable life had already begun to crumble, and that the man sleeping peacefully next to her was not just a witness, but an accomplice in a conspiracy that was about to destroy everything she had worked so long and hard to build. The first bell has already rung, but she had not yet realized its sinister meaning. The following weeks passed in a fog of latent anxiety. Outwardly, nothing had changed, but the tension in the air could be cut with a knife. Tamara Pavlovna began to visit more frequently. She no longer spoke directly about children, but her tactics became more subtle, and therefore even more unbearable. She would casually leave magazine clippings on the coffee table with articles on the happiness of motherhood after 30, or how a career ruins women's health. Oh, Marinochka, I cut this out for myself to read in my spare time. She blinked her eyes innocently when Marina looked at her questioningly. I just forgot to put it in my bag. Kirill has changed too. His usual gentleness and compliance were replaced by a quiet, stubborn detachment. He stopped admiring her success at work. When she excitedly talked about signing a major contract, he only chuckled vaguely, without looking up from his laptop screen. Well done, he threw over his shoulder, and there was not a drop of warmth in this word. One evening he approached her as she worked at her desk in the living room. You've been sitting too long again, he said, standing behind her. It's already 11 o'clock. I need to finish the presentation by the morning, she replied without turning around. You always have presentations, reports, contracts. There was irritation in his voice, and there's no time left for a normal life. What do you call a normal life? Kirill? She turned sharply in her chair. Well, he hesitated, clearly not expecting such a rebuff. Family, home, dinner on time, maybe some kind of hobby, feminine embroidery or flowers. My work is not just a job, Marina stated firmly. It's what I like, what I understand, and what, by the way, allows us to live in this apartment, and you to pursue your creative pursuits. He frowned. The mention of her financial superiority had always been a sore subject for him. I'm just saying that you take on too much, he muttered. You're becoming somehow rigid, masculine. So, in your opinion, a successful woman is a masculine woman? She raised an eyebrow. No, that's not what I meant. He began to get angry. I just want that you'd be home more, that you'd be gentler like before. This conversation left a bitter taste in Marina's mouth. She realized that she and her husband viewed life completely differently. For her, success and self-realization were important. For him, her success was a reproach, a reminder of his own inadequacy. And instead of striving for something himself, he wanted only one thing, for her to sink to his level, to become comfortable, domestic, dependent. Tamara Pavlovna, as if sensing the change in her son's mood, increased her pressure. She began telling heartbreaking stories about her friends who had dedicated their entire lives to family and were now surrounded by the love of their children and grandchildren. Look, Lenochka Sokolova, remember? Son? We met at the sanatorium, she chirped over dinner. She has 3 grandchildren, but they are never far from her. They bake pies together and go to the country house. Here it is, real female happiness. These are your projects. Marina silently picked at her salad with her fork. Every word the mother-in-law said was a small poisoned arrow aimed straight at her heart. She felt trapped. On the one hand, she had a favorite. Job, goals, and ambitions. On the other, she had a husband and mother-in-law who methodically instilled in her a sense of guilt for not living up to their ideas of a proper woman. One day, while taking a shower, she dropped her cosmetic bag. The contents, scattered across the cafe floor, lipstick, mascara, eyeshadow, and a blister pack with tablets. Marina bent down to collect everything, and her gaze fell on the packaging again. And then she noticed a small, almost imperceptible, scratch on the foil next to the cell. On Tuesday, she froze. She was a pedant to the core and knew for sure that, yesterday, when she took out the pill, this scratch was not there. My heart skipped a beat. She quickly picked up the blister pack and brought it closer to her eyes. The foil in this place was slightly raised, as if it had been carefully lifted with something. Thin. With trembling hands, she pressed on the cell with the next pill for Wednesday. The P jumped out easily. Marina brought it to her nose. No smell. She always knew that her tablets had a subtle, specific medicinal smell. It didn't smell like anything. She poured out a few more. They were all the same, perfectly round, white, odorless. Panic began to rise in my throat. Can't be. This is paranoia. But an inner voice insistently whispered, "Check. You must check." After leaving the bathroom, she found a picture of her pills on the internet. A larger photograph showed that there was a tiny engraving on one side, 2 letters. Marina poured the remaining pills from her. Blister pack into her palm. They were absolutely smooth. The world rocked, the air ran out. She sat down on the edge of the tub, looking at the useless white circles in her hand. Who could have done this? The answer was obvious and terrible. Tamara Pavlovna, with her constant visits, with her keys to their apartment, which Kirill gave her just in. Case, with her obsession with her grandchildren. But Kirill, did he really know? Was he in cahoots with his mother, his detachment, his strange reproaches, his desire for her to become softer? All the pieces of the mosaic suddenly came together to form one monstrous picture. They did it together, and they decided for her. They decided to ruin her career, her life, and tie her to the house with a child. She didn't say anything that evening. She was too shocked to speak. She lay down on her bed and stared into the darkness, feeling the breath of the man who had betrayed her next to her. And she understood that this was only the beginning. The worst was yet to come. The first reaction was shock, followed by icy rage. Marina wanted to immediately create a scandal. Throw Kirill out of her apartment, call Tamara Pavlovna and tell her everything. But she restrained herself. My intuition told me that acting on emotions meant losing. She needed not just suspicions, but facts. The next day she took a day off from work, citing a migraine. After waiting for Kirill to leave for another photo shoot in the park, she took action. First, she went to the pharmacy and bought a new pack of her pills. After comparing them with those in her blister pack, she was finally convinced that her pills had been switched. But for what? On chalk? Nascorbinka? She carefully collected several counterfeit pills into a sterile container. She then went to an independent chemical laboratory. "I need to analyze this substance," she said to the lab technician, a young man in a white coat. "As soon as possible?" "What is it?" he asked curiously. "I suspect it's vitamins," Marina found, "but I want to be." "Sure. It's strange," the guy shrugged. "But for your money, any whim. The results will be ready by tomorrow evening." Marina spent the rest of the day in a daze. She stopped at the mall and bought 3 different pregnancy tests. At home, locked in the bathroom, she took the first one. While she waited for the results, her heart was pounding so hard it seemed ready to jump out of her chest. She looked at the small plastic strip, and her future depended on whether the second line appeared on it. It appeared bright, clear, merciless. Marina sank to the floor, exhausted. Tears gushed out of her eyes. These were not the cries of joy that they show in the movies. These were tears of despair, anger, and helplessness. Her life, her career, her plans. Everything collapsed in an instant. Her body was betrayed, her will was trampled. They won. The second and third tests only confirmed the result. 2 stripes. I'm pregnant. She sat for a long time on the cold floor, hugging her knees. Her head was in absolute chaos. What to do? Abortion. The thought burned with shame. She never thought she would have to face such a choice. But now it seemed the only way out, a way to regain control of her life. But will she be able to? In the evening, Kirill returned. He was in a good mood. He brought her favorite cakes. "Hello, darling. How is your migraine?" "It's gone." Marina looked at him silently. How can he be so calm? How can he look her in the eyes after what he did? Did something happen? He frowned, noticing her condition. You look so pale, Kirill. We need to talk, she said quietly. They sat in the kitchen. Marina took 3 pregnancy tests out of her robe pocket and put them on the table. What is this? He looked at the stripes, and on his face a poorly concealed triumph was reflected. He tried to look surprised, but his eyes were shining. It can't be, he muttered. Marish, is it true? We're having a baby. Yes, Kirill. Her voice sounded muffled. We're having a baby. Now explain to me how this could happen if I'm taking birth control. He was confused. Apparently, he wasn't prepared for such a question. Well, he hesitated. They probably didn't work. Misfires happen. Misfires. She smiled bitterly. Or did someone really want this misfire to happen? What do you mean? He drew his eyebrows together, feigning incomprehension. I mean the counterfeit pills in my makeup bag, she said, looking him straight in the eyes. Kirill turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie, Kirill. She slammed her palm on the table. Stop lying. Your mother did this. I know. And did you know? Were you in cahoots with her? He was silent, his head down, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. I didn't want it, he finally squeezed out. Mom said it would be better for everyone, that a child would bring us closer, that you would become softer, more feminine. Better for everyone, Marina screamed. You wanted to say it was better for you, that I would quit my job, sit at home, cook borscht, and be completely dependent on you. You decided to ruin my life because my success irritated you. That's not true, he exclaimed. I love you, and I want this child. You don't want a child, her voice broke with tears and rage. You want a comfortable wife, a housewife, and your mother wants the same. You are both selfish and manipulators. At that moment, the lock clicked in the hallway. Tamara Pavlovna entered the apartment. She must have heard the screams from the landing. What's going on here? She asked imperiously, entering the kitchen. Her gaze fell on the tests on the table, and her face broke into a satisfied smile. Oh, I see you have good news. It's finally happened. Congratulations, son. You'll be a father soon. She completely ignored Marina, addressing only Kirill. You did this, Marina hissed, getting up from the table. Did you switch my pills? Tamara Pavlovna gave her a disdainful look. Don't talk nonsense, girl. You should be thanking me. I helped nature and your family. Now you'll finally get down to your real business having and raising children and not playing at being a businesswoman. Her complacency and her confidence in her own rightness were so disgusting that Marina caught her breath. I'll have an abortion, she said quietly but clearly. The smile slid off Tamara Pavlovna's face. Kirill jumped up. You wouldn't dare, he screamed. This is my child. You have no right, his mother echoed. This is murder. This is my body, Marina screamed. And it's my right to decide. You invaded my life, my body. You deceived me. And you think I'll give birth to this child to become your slave? Never. She ran out of the kitchen, slamming the bedroom door behind her. She heard them shouting in the hallway, Kirill knocking on the door, begging her to open it. But she didn't open it. She fell onto the bed and burst into tears, realizing that her life had turned into a battlefield where she was alone against everyone. And the main battle was still ahead. The next day, an oppressive silence reigned in the apartment. Kirill walked through the rooms like a shadow, throwing frightened, accusatory glances at Marina. Tamara Pavlovna apparently had given him a tirade because he no longer shouted, but tried to persuade her. Marish, he began when? She was sitting in the kitchen, staring blankly into a cup of cold tea. Don't get carried. Away, you're in the heat of the moment. Abortion is a serious step. You'll regret it your whole life. But if I give birth, I won't regret it, she asked bitterly. To live with a man who betrayed me. To raise a child who was born as a result of deception and manipulation. But this is our child. His voice took on a tearful tone. Our darling. How can you say that? You tell me, how could you do that? She looked him in the eyes. How could you let your mother do that? I thought it would be better this way. He looked down. Mom said that you yourself will never decide that your career is more important to you than family. And 4, you then, family is deceiving me into staying on maternity leave. She shook her head. You and I, Kirill, have very different ideas about family. That same day, the results came from the lab. As Marina had expected, the counterfeit pills turned out to be ordinary vitamins. Folic acid. What irony! The mother-in-law who had been poisoning her life, at the same time she stuffed her with prenatal vitamins. Marina printed out the report and placed it prominently on the kitchen table. It was her proof, her weapon. Tamara Pavlovna arrived in the evening. She brought chicken broth in a thermos and a stack of books on raising children. Here, Marinochka, she began from the doorway, ignoring the tense atmosphere. You need to eat well now and start preparing for motherhood. I brought you some classics, Bach, Komarovsky. Will you be reading them in your spare time? I won't read them, Marina replied coldly. Because there won't be any motherhood. Her mother-in-law pursed her lips. Are you still sulking, my girl? It's time to grow up. What's done is done. You need to think about the future of my grandson or granddaughter. That's none of your concern, Marina snapped. How is it not mine? Tamara Pavlovna was indignant. I'm a future grandmother. I have every right to participate in my grandson's life. Their conversation was interrupted by Kirill, who left the room. Mom, I asked you to, he began. Let us figure it out ourselves. What's there to figure out? She threw up her hands. She dug in her heels, but her mother-in-law stopped short, noticing Marina's withering gaze. In general, she needs to be convinced, otherwise she will make a terrible mistake. The only terrible mistake here is your action, Marina intervened. She took the laboratory report from the table. Here, you can admire it. An analysis of the pills with which you kindly replaced my contraceptives. Folic acid. Do you even understand what you've done? You didn't just interfere in my life, you committed a vile act. Tamara Pavlovna glanced at the paper and snorted. What a vile act. I took care of your health and the health of your unborn child. You should thank me. Thank you, Marina laughed, but the laughter was like a sob. Thank you for ruining my plans, for putting me before a terrible choice, for showing the true face of my husband, who turned out to be a weak-willed wimp. Don't you dare. Talk about my son like that, Tamara Pavlovna shrieked. And how can I talk about him? Marina didn't let up. He's your accomplice. He knew and kept silent. He betrayed me. Enough, Kirill shouted. Stop it, both of you. But there was no stopping them. The anger, resentment, and disappointment that had accumulated over months burst out. You were always against me, Marina shouted at her mother-in-law. From the very first day, you considered me unworthy of your son, and you are unworthy. She didn't remain in debt. Tamara Pavlovna, a careerist who thinks only of herself. My son deserves a normal wife who will bear him children and cook borscht, and not run around to her meetings. Or maybe your son should first find a normal job to provide for these very children? Marina clearly abandoned it, and not sit on the neck of a careerist wife. Kirill became idolized. I am in creative search. Your creative search has been going on for 3 years already, Marina couldn't help but say. During this time you haven't earned a penny. I pay for the apartment, I take care of your stupid lenses, and you dare reproach me? The argument was terrible. They said so much nastiness to each other that it seemed there was no way back. At some point, Tamara Pavlovna clutched her heart. That's it. I can't do this anymore. I'm having an attack. Kiryusha water was her signature move. As soon as the situation got out of control, she would immediately have an attack. Kirill, as always, rushed too. Her, fussily pouring water into a glass, looking for pills. Do you see what you've brought my mother to? He shouted at Marina. Not me, but you brought yourselves to it, she answered tiredly. She went into the bedroom and locked the door. She could no longer see their faces, hear their voices. She lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Inside was a scorched desert. She realized this was the end, final and irrevocable. It didn't matter whether she had an abortion or not. She couldn't live with these people anymore. The only question was how to get out of this situation with the least amount of loss for herself. She took out her phone and dialed her lawyer friend. Lena, hi. I need your advice. I think I'm going to get a divorce after that terrible argument, a fragile truce, more like a cold. War reigned in the house. Marina barely spoke to Kirill, communicating with him only when necessary. Tamara Pavlovna temporarily stopped her visits, but it was obvious she hadn't given up, but was simply lying low, waiting for the right moment to attack again. Kirill, apparently receiving new instructions from his mother, changed tactics. He stopped pressuring and persuading, and instead surrounded Marina with feigned care. He brought her orange juice in the mornings, bought her fruit, and gave her foot massages in the evenings. "You can't worry," he said with feigned tenderness. "It's bad for the baby." Marina felt sick from this falseness. She saw that behind all this concern there was only one thing, the fear that she would still decide to board. They treated her not as a beloved woman, but as a valuable incubator that needed to be protected and guarded. Tamara Pavlovna did not sit idly by either. One day, Kirill returned home with a huge bag from the baby store. "Mom gave these to me," he said embarrassedly, laying out tiny rompers, bonnets, and booties on the sofa. "She said for our future hero." Marina looked at these things, and her heart sank with pain and anger. They had already decided everything, decided on. Half the child decided on his future. They were already celebrating their victory, while she was tormented by uncertainty and fear. "Take it away," she said quietly. "Marish, what are you doing?" He tried to hug her. "It's sweet." "I said, take it away." Her voice broke into a scream. "I don't want to see this. You have no right to decide for me." She knew time was running out. Pointing for an abortion was only possible after a certain period of time. Every day of delay diminished her chances. But she couldn't make up her mind. Something inside her protested. The thought of killing a tiny, defenseless creature was unbearable, but the thought of giving birth to a child into this family, of being bound to these people for life, was no less terrifying. She began secretly visiting doctors, gynecologists, psychologists. She sought an answer, sought support. "The decision is yours alone," an elderly psychologist told her sympathetically. "No, one can force you to give birth or have an abortion. You must understand what you want. Not your husband, not your mother-in-law, but you." But Marina didn't know what she wanted. Her own desires were buried under the weight of others' expectations, manipulation, and betrayal. Meanwhile, Tamara Pavlovna went on the offensive on another front. She began actively planning the renovation of their apartment. "I think your office would make a great nursery," she declared, arriving unannounced one day. The window faced the sunny side, just what a baby needed. "I have my desk and equipment there," Marina tried to object. "Nonsense," her mother-in-law dismissed. "Will you move your computer to the kitchen? You'll be on maternity leave soon anyway, and you won't have enough work. We'll do a good renovation here. We'll buy a crib and a changing table. I've already found a great Italian set online." Marina looked at it and realized she was slowly but surely being squeezed out of her own life. Her space, her interests, her career. All of this was to be sacrificed for the future heir. Kirill was completely supportive of his mother. "Mom's right," he said that evening. "You really should think about maternity leave. Your boss won't be thrilled if you're constantly asking for time off to go to the doctor." "I haven't decided yet whether I'll continue this pregnancy," she reminded him. "Stop it," he winced as if he had a toothache. "You wouldn't do that. I know you're not like that." He was so sure of it, and it was this certainty that infuriated him the most. Marina realized that she needed the last, most compelling point, medical confirmation. Not just lines on a test, but a live image on a monitor screen. She signed up for an ultrasound at a private clinic without telling her husband or mother-in-law. She wanted to go alone, wanted to face her problem in peace and quiet, and make a final decision. But it was not possible to hide it. Kirill accidentally saw a reminder about a doctor's appointment on her phone. "The ultrasound?" he asked. "Why didn't you tell me? I want to go too. I want to see our baby. This is my visit." "Kirill, no, this is our visit." He grabbed her hands. "I'm the father. I have the right." Tamara Pavlovna called in the evening. Marinochka, Kiryusha said you're going to the ultrasound tomorrow. We'll come together. I need to make sure my grandson is. Okay. No one invited you, Marina replied coldly. And we don't need to be invited, her mother-in-law snapped. We're a family. We'll be at the clinic at 10. Marina hung up, feeling cornered. They wouldn't leave her alone even. There. They would turn this intimate, important moment into another family performance. She wanted to cancel the visit, but she knew it was just a postponement. Sooner or later, she would have to go through with it. Fine, she thought with a kind of evil determination. You want a show? You'll get one. The morning before the clinic was filled with tension as thick as jelly. Marina sipped her coffee in silence. Kirill fussed around the apartment, choosing a shirt, as if he were going to the Nobel Prize ceremony rather than an ultrasound. He was clearly nervous, but tried to hide it behind feigned enthusiasm. Can you imagine, Marish? He said, tying his tie. We'll see our child for the first time today. Maybe they'll even tell us the gender. I'd like a son. I'll name him Pavel after my grandfather. Marina didn't answer. For her, this visit wasn't a celebration, but more like a march to the scaffold. Tamara Pavlovna was waiting for them at the entrance to the clinic. She was dressed in her best suit, her face filled with solemn importance. Well, my lovelies, are you ready to meet the future? She asked, casting an appraising glance at Marina. You look a little pale. Are you nervous? That's good. The maternal instinct is awakening. Marina remained silent as she passed her into the hall. In the ultrasound room, they were greeted by a young diagnostician with tired but kind eyes. Hello, come in, she said. Who is our expectant mother? There she is, Kirill declared proudly, pointing to Marina. And we are the father and grandmother. The doctor raised an eyebrow in surprise, looking at Tamara Pavlovna. Usually 2 people come to the first ultrasound. We have a special case, the mother-in-law declared categorically, sitting down on a chair near the couch. We take the issue of childbirth very seriously. Marina lay down on the couch. The doctor applied a cold gel to her stomach and began moving the transducer. Some blurry black and white images appeared on the large monitor hanging on the wall. Well, what's up, doctor? Tamara Pavlovna asked impatiently, peering at the screen. Is everything okay with my grandson? Please don't disturb me, the doctor asked politely but firmly. I need to concentrate. She moved the sensor silently for a long time. Her eyebrows slowly moved upward. She was measuring something by clicking buttons on the device, then returning to the same area again and again. There was silence in the office, broken only by the hum of the equipment. Marina felt a chill run down her spine. Something's wrong, doctor. Something wrong? Kirill couldn't stand it. His voice wavered. The doctor did not answer. She looked carefully at the screen again, then turned her, gazed to Marina, then to her worried relatives. So, she said finally, the pregnancy period is 8 weeks. Dense egg in the uterus. Everything is as it should be. Heartbeat. She pressed another button, and the room filled with a rapid rhythmic sound, like the tapping of a small hammer. Knock, 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 knock. Do you hear? The doctor smiled. This is your baby's heart. Kirill breathed a sigh of relief. Tamara Pavlovna beamed. God bless. I knew that my Kiryusha could only have a healthy child. She looked triumphantly at Marina, as if this was her personal achievement. And the floor is already visible. It's impossible to determine the gender at this stage. The doctor shook her head. But there is something else. She turned back to the monitor. So, here's one heartbeat, and here she moved the sensor a little to the side. Here's the second one. Silence reigned in the office again. Second? Kirill asked again. What does the second mean? The doctor smiled again, but now there was a mischievous tinge to her smile. This means, Daddy, that you are having twins. Tamara Pavlovna gasped. Twins? 2 at once? Oh, Kiryusha, you really tried. 2 heirs at once? She was absolutely delighted. Kirill looked, stunned, but also seemed pleased. Marina lay there, unable to utter a word. 2. It changed everything, her plans, her life. Everything was multiplied. By 2. Wait. the doctor suddenly said, frowning again. She began moving the sensor again, peering at the screen with intense attention. Something's very interesting here. What's wrong? Tamara Pavlovna asked worriedly. Are they okay? More than, the doctor answered mysteriously. She enlarged the image, pointing to 3 tiny, pulsating dots. Congratulations, she looked around at the stunned visitors. You're having triplets. For a second, there was absolute deathly silence in the office. All that could be heard was the hum of the machine and 3 little hearts beating in unison on the monitor screen. Tamara Pavlovna was the first to break down. Her face, which had been beaming with pride just a minute ago, turned first white, then greenish. 3 triplets, she babbled. Exactly, the doctor confirmed. 3 fertilized eggs, 3 embryos, 3 heartbeats. A rare case, but it happens. The mother-in-law made a strange gurgling sound. Her eyes rolled back, and she slowly began to sink from her chair to the floor. Mom! Kirill shouted, rushing towards her. The doctor pressed a button under the table. The nurse to room 23. Urgent, we have a fainting spell. Kirill, pale as death, tried to revive his mother, slapping her cheeks. And Marina? Marina lay on the couch, staring at the 3 pulsating dots on the screen. Triplets. Her brain refused to process this information, but instead of the horror and despair that should have overwhelmed her, she suddenly felt a strange, almost malicious calm. She looked at her terrified husband, at her mother-in-law's unconscious body, and understood. Their insidious plan had just backfired. They wanted to tie her to the house with 1 child, and now they would have 3. And that changed absolutely everything. While the nurse and doctor who had rushed in tried to revive Tamara Pavlovna with ammonia, Kirill stood in the middle of the room, confusedly looking from his mother to the ultrasound monitor. His face expressed a whole range of emotions, from shock and disbelief to outright horror. 3, he muttered under his breath. What do you mean, 3? This can't be. Doctor, are you sure? Maybe the device made a mistake? The machine doesn't make mistakes and never leaves the mother-in-law's side, the doctor replied. Congratulations, Dad. You will soon become a father of many children. Get ready. Tamara Pavlovna finally woke up. She sat on the floor, clutching her head in her hands and rocking from side to side as if in a trance. Trainia, she whispered. Why is this happening to me? I just wanted 1 calm grandson, and this is a whole gang. Noise, screaming, diapers, triple consumption. She raised her tear-filled eyes to Kirill. Kiryusha, what are we going to do? Marina watched this performance in silence. She got up from the couch, wiped the remaining gel from her stomach, and began to dress. A cold, ringing emptiness grew and strengthened inside her, giving her strength. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman carrying 3 children under her heart, and this made her invulnerable. We have to go, she said, when her mother-in-law, with the help of her son, finally got to her feet. Where? Kirill asked fearfully, as if he was afraid to be left alone with this news. Home, Marina answered calmly. We have a lot to discuss. The journey home passed in deathly silence. Kirill drove the car, gripping the steering wheel with white fingers. Tamara Pavlovna sat in the back seat, looking out the window with an unseeing gaze. She apparently still couldn't come to her senses. Lady, Kirill's panic broke out. As soon as the door closed behind them, he began to rush around the living room. 3? Do you understand what this means? That's 3 cribs, 3 strollers, 3 sets of clothes. That's tons of diapers. Where are we going to get so much money? Did you want a child, Kirill? Here, get 3 at once, Marina remarked dispassionately, sitting down in the chair. I wanted 1, he shouted. 1 and not a whole kindergarten? I'm not ready for this. My creative career. I can forget about her. I'll have to go to work at the factory. How awful, Marina drawled ironically. I'll have to work. What a tragedy for a freelance photographer. Don't you dare be sarcastic. He stopped in front of her, his face distorted with anger and fear. It's all your fault. She raised an eyebrow in surprise. Yes, the first. With your heredity, there were probably twins in your family. In my family, everyone was healthy and gave birth to 1 child, she snapped. And as for your mother, who stuffed me with unknown vitamins, who knows, maybe they stimulated my body like that?" Tamara Pavlovna, who had been sitting silently in the corner until then, shuddered. "Don't talk nonsense," she exclaimed. "They were ordinary prenatal vitamins. I wanted the best. It's always like this with you." Marina sighed. "You want the best, but you end up with triplets." Kirill clutched his head again. "What are we going to say? People? 3 children from an unemployed photographer," and he stumbled, and Marina, the head of the marketing department with a 6-figure. Salary finished the job for him. "Don't worry, we won't die of hunger. At least, children, are you going to keep working?" he asked hopefully. "And I have a choice." She looked at him. "Are you going to provide for us?" He remained silent, and that was more eloquent than any answer. "I thought so," Marina nodded. Then, "Listen to me both carefully." She sat up straight in her chair, and her voice took on the authority with which she usually conducted meetings. "Your plan failed. You wanted to lock me at home with 1 child, but ended up with a problem 3 times larger. And we'll solve this problem according to my rules." Tamara Pavlovna and Kirill stared at her, like rabbits trying to catch a boa constrictor. There was no trace of the former compliant Marina left. Before them sat a cold, calculating businesswoman who had just been dealt 3 trump cards. "First, I'm not quitting my job," she began, bending her finger. "I'll take the maternity leave I'm entitled to by law, and then I'll either go back to the office or work remotely. But who's going to look after the children?" Tamara Pavlovna snapped, terrified. "I can't. 3 is too much." "And no one's asking you," Marina snapped. "We'll hire a nanny, maybe even 2. "A nanny?" Kirill's eyes widened. "Do you know how much they cost?" "Now you will," she promised, because secondly, she bent her 2nd finger. "You, Kirill, immediately stop your creative search and find a normal, stable job with a good salary, because the expenses for 3 children will be colossal. And I'm not going to carry all the weight, but I'm a photographer. You are a future father of 3 children. If, in order to feed them, you have to photograph not models, but plumbing fixtures for a catalog, you will do it." She turned her gaze to her mother-in-law. "And thirdly, your participation in the lives of my children, Tamara Pavlovna, will be strictly measured. No, I'm a grandmother. No advice unless I ask for it. You will come to visit only at my invitation." "How dare you?" She started, but stopped under Marina's cold gaze. "I've said it all," she summed up. "These are my conditions. If you don't accept them, I'm filing for divorce and alimony for the 3 children. Kirill, can you calculate how much this will amount to from your future salary at the factory?" "I think you'll like it." She stood up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to rest. Expectant mothers, especially mothers of triplets, should not worry." She went to her bedroom, leaving the 2 of them to digest what they had heard. She closed the door, leaned her back against it, and only then allowed herself to smile. She felt empty, but at the same time incredibly strong. She regained control. And that was just the beginning. After Marina left for the bedroom, a heavy silence fell over the living room. Kirill and Tamara Pavlovna sat as if struck by lightning, unable to comprehend the scale of the catastrophe into which their brilliant plan had turned. She's not joking," Kirill finally squeezed out, looking at his mother with an absent gaze. "She's really going to do it. Divorce, alimony." "Don't you dare panic," Tamara Pavlovna hissed at him, although her own voice trembled. "She's just scary. She'll get pregnant, her hormones will settle down, and she'll become silky smooth. It won't." He jumped up and began to rush around the room again. "Haven't you seen her eyes? This is not our Marina. This is some kind of fury. She will destroy us. 3 children, Mother. 3? I will have to work for the rest of my life to provide for them." "What did you want?" An angry note appeared in the mother-in-law's voice. "I thought that the baby would be born and everything would work out by itself. I thought there would be 1 child." He stopped and pointed his finger at her. "It's all your fault with your stupid ideas. We'll change the pills. She won't go anywhere. We've played too much." Tamara Pavlovna, jumped up, offended to the depths of my soul. Yes, I tried for you, ungrateful. I wanted you to have a normal family so that your wife would sit at home and not boss you around, and you couldn't even become a man to put her in her place. How do I put it? He laughed hysterically. She earns 5 times more than me. The apartment is hers. Everything is hers. I'm nobody here. And now I will also be indebted to her for the rest of my days. Their squabble became louder and louder. They shouted at each other, accusing each other of all mortal sins. Kirill reminded his mother of her constant control, her interference in their lives. Tamara Pavlovna, in turn, reproached her sons for their lack of willpower and laziness. Marina heard their screams through the door, and a cold smile played on her face. Let them pour out on each other all the bile that they have been saving up for her for years. Let them understand that their ideal union of mother and son has cracked. An hour later, when they were both exhausted, Kirill knocked on her door. "Marish, can I?" His voice sounded pathetic and guilty. Marina opened the door. He stood with his shoulders slumped, completely crushed. Tamara Pavlovna sat on the sofa, staring at one point. "What have you decided?" Marina asked. He swallowed. "We agree to your terms. That's it," she clarified. "That's it," he nodded. "I'll start looking for a job tomorrow." "Okay," said Marina. "Now I want your mother to leave. I need to rest." Tamara Pavlovna stood up silently and, without looking at her daughter-in-law, wandered towards the exit. At the door, she turned around. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "I don't think so," Marina answered calmly. "Tamara Pavlovna, it will be you who will feel sorry now. A very long time." When the door closed behind his mother-in-law, Kirill approached Marina. "Marish, I'm sorry," he stammered. "I'm such an idiot. I ruined everything." "Yes, an offer. You're an idiot and you ruined everything. But now you have a chance to at least fix something, for the sake of your children." She walked around him and went into the kitchen. She was hungry. Pregnant women are said to need to eat well, especially if there are 3 of them. The following days were like a surreal film. Kirill, as promised, plunged headlong into his job search. He sent his resume to every possible company, went to interviews, returned in the evening tired and angry, but did not give up. The panic of being responsible for 3 children turned out to be the best motivator. Marina, on the contrary, allowed herself to relax. She took a short vacation from work, slept a lot, walked and read. She no longer thought about abortion. In a strange way, the news about the triplets put everything into place. This was her challenge, her personal project, and she was going to carry it out. Brilliantly. She started planning, making a detailed list of everything she needed for 3 babies. The sum turned out to be astronomical. In the evening, she silently placed this list in front of Kirill. He looked at the numbers for a long time, his face growing paler. "Is this for 1? He asked hopefully. "No, it's for 3 and only for the first year," she said mercilessly. "So I would advise you to accept any job offer, even if it is a photographer for a local newspaper." A week later, Kirill found a job. Not a photographer, of course, but a sales manager at the same company where Dima from the previous story once worked. The salary was not exorbitant, but stable. "I've got a job," he said in the evening, handing her an employment contract. Marina ran her eyes over the document. "Not bad for a start," she nodded, "but that won't be enough. You'll have to find a part-time job." He nodded silently. There is no trace left of the former free artist. In front of her sat a frightened man, reality crashing down on him. Tamara Pavlovna didn't call again, apparently digesting her defeat. Marina knew that she had not given up, but had only changed tactics. Now, she will act through Kirill, trying to evoke pity and guilt in him. But Marina was ready. She was no longer afraid of her mother-in-law. The forces were on her side. 3 small but very significant forces that were now growing inside her. As time went on, Marina's belly became noticeably rounder. Toxicosis tormented her, mercilessly, but she endured it stoically, realizing that this was only a small part of the difficulties that awaited her ahead. Kirill, as promised, worked. He left early in the morning and returned late in the evening, tired and irritated. The romantic, veneer of a creative personality has completely disappeared from him, revealing an ordinary, not very successful manager who hates his job. He no longer spoke of love. Their relationship evolved into a business partnership for the forced reproduction of offspring. They discussed the budget, upcoming purchases, and doctor's appointments. Sometimes at night he tried to hug her, but Marina gently pulled away. Betrayal is not forgotten so quickly. Tamara Pavlovna, as Marina had expected, began her game. She called Kirill at work, complaining about her health, about loneliness, about how hard it was for her without his support. "Have you completely forgotten about your mother?" Marina heard snatches of their conversations when Kirill was talking to her on the phone in another room. "It's your shrew who has completely taken control of you." Kirill answered something sluggishly, made excuses, but it was clear that his mother's manipulations were having an effect on him. He became even more sullen and withdrawn. Marina understood that a preemptive strike was necessary. She waited until the weekend, when Kirill was home and held the very family council she had promised. "Sit down. We need to discuss our future," she said, placing a laptop on the table in front of him. "What else?" he asked tiredly. "I'm already sewing like crazy." "That's not enough," she snapped. "I have drawn up a detailed financial plan for the next 3 years. She unfolded the laptop. On the screen was a huge Excel table with dozens of rows and columns. Expenses for food, clothing, diapers, doctors, nannies, educational toys. Everything was calculated with mathematical precision and multiplied by 3. The total amount was displayed in bold at the bottom. Kirill stared at the screen. "This is this? What is this?" "The cost of a small African country," he muttered. "This is the cost of raising 3 children in St. Petersburg," Marina corrected him. "And this is according to the most conservative estimates, without taking into account inflation and unforeseen expenses such as private clinics if, God forbid, someone gets sick." He looked at the numbers in silence. His face expressed quiet horror. "As you can see," Marina continued, "your salary and my maternity benefits won't be enough for us, even if we eat only buckwheat. What do you suggest?" "Sell your apartment and move to a communal apartment?" he asked sarcastically. "I suggest you start thinking." Her voice was calm. "You have 3 months before giving birth to find a second job or change this one to a higher paying one." "Are you crazy?" He jumped up. "I don't sleep at night anyway. When else will I have time to work? These are your problems, Kirill. You wanted children. You were part of a conspiracy to get me pregnant. Now please be kind and take responsibility." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Tamara Pavlovna stood on the threshold. She apparently decided it was time to go on the personal offensive. "I came to check on you," she said, walking into the apartment. "Marinochka, you need to walk more. The complexion is unhealthy. We're busy, Tamara Pavlovna," said Marina, blocking her way into the kitchen. "We're discussing the family budget." "Oh, I love that," the mother-in-law perked up. "I'm a professional at this. I'll help you plan everything. We can handle it ourselves," Marina snapped. But Tamara Pavlovna had already squeezed into the kitchen and saw a laptop with an open spreadsheet. "Oh my God," she gasped, peering at the numbers. "What are these amounts? Are you going to buy them golden pacifiers?" "These are real expenses for 3 children," Marina explained. "And as you can see, we can't handle them. That's why I suggested that Kirill find a second job." "A second job?" Her mother-in-law gave her a withering look. "Do you want to drive my son into the grave? He's already working himself to the point of exhaustion." "Do you have any other suggestions?" Marina asked. "Perhaps you are ready to sell your apartment and invest the money in the future of your grandchildren?" Tamara Pavlovna choked. "What? Your apartment? How dare you? This is my only home. And this is Marina waving her hand around the kitchen. And I'm not going to sell it to satisfy your son's desires." "So he has little choice. Either it starts spinning or what?" the mother-in-law asked defiantly. "Either I divorce him and file for alimony, and then he will have to give up half of his salary, and no creative search will save him." Tamara Pavlovna and Kirill exchanged glances. There was the same fear in their eyes. They realized that Marina was not joking. You can't," Kirill stammered. "I can," she nodded. "I found out everything. The law is on my side and on the side of my children. So decide. Either we are a team and you start working hard like a grown man, or we are enemies and then I will take action through. The courts. Time has begun." She walked out of the kitchen, leaving them alone. She heard them begin to argue, their voices fading to whispers. She knew that her future and the future of her children were being decided now, and she was ready for any outcome. She became strong. Pregnancy, oddly enough, did not make her weaker. On the contrary, it gave her triple power. The negotiations in the kitchen lasted more than an hour. Marina sat in the bedroom reading a book, but the words wouldn't come to her mind. She listened to the muffled voices coming from behind the door. At first they argued. Tamara Pavlovna accused her of blackmail. Kirill mumbled something in response. Then the voices died down and there was silence. Finally, the kitchen door creaked. Kirill looked into the bedroom. "Marish, can I come in?" He entered. Tamara Pavlovna followed him like a shadow. Her face was darker than a cloud. "We talked," Kirill began, not looking her in the eyes. "I agree. I will look for a second job." Minus and Marina were waiting for the continuation. She knew that it wouldn't work out here either. "And Mom," he hesitated, casting a pleading glance at Tamara Pavlovna. "I'll help," she muttered through her teeth. "I'm ready to. Babysit when you go back to work. To prevent you from spending money on nannies." Marina barely suppressed a smile. It was their last attempt to maintain control. If she agrees, Tamara Pavlovna will become the full-fledged mistress of her house, raising the children at her own discretion. "No," Marina said firmly. "What do you mean, no?" The mother-in-law got angry. "I offer you my help for free. And you refuse?" "Yes, because your help would cost me too much. I'll hire professional nannies who will follow my instructions instead of trying to raise my children and me at the same time." "But we don't have the money for that," Kirill exclaimed. "Then look for a job where I'll be paid enough to take care of both the children and the nannies," Marina shrugged. "That's not my problem." Tamara Pavlovna realized she had lost completely. Her last trick hadn't worked. You're just a monster," she hissed. "No, I'm just a mother who protects the future of her children," Marina answered calmly. "And now I think it's time for you to go. I need to rest." Her mother-in-law, throwing a look of complete hatred at her, flew out of the apartment. Kirill was left standing in the middle of the room. "Marish," he began, "maybe you did go too far after all?" Mom wanted to. "Help, Kirill," Marina interrupted him. "The conversation is over. You have a task. Go and do it, otherwise you know what will happen." He nodded silently and left. From that day on, their life turned into a race for survival. Kirill really did find a second job as a night worker. He worked as a security guard at a business center. He worked in the office during the day and at night at the checkpoint. He would come home in the early morning, sleep for a few hours, and then leave again. Marina saw him only in snatches. He had lost weight, looked haggard, and there were dark shadows under his eyes. He no longer argued or complained. He simply silently fulfilled his end of the agreement. Marina, on the contrary, blossomed. She enjoyed her pregnancy, setting up the future nursery, buying everything she needed. She hired a staffing agency, and they found her 2 wonderful nannies with medical training. She signed a contract with them, clearly outlining all duties and work schedules. The birth was difficult. Triplets are always a risk, but everything went well. 2 boys and 1 girl were born, 2 little Kirushkas and 1 tiny Marinochka. When she saw them lying in special boxes, so defenseless and tiny, her heart filled with such love that it seemed it would burst. Kirill arrived at the maternity hospital, straight from the night shift, sleep-deprived, with stubble on his face. He stood by the glass behind which his children lay, crying unashamedly like a child. "They're so little," he whispered. "Yes," smiled Marina, who was standing nearby. "But they are ours." At that moment, for the first time in a long time, she felt something akin to pity for him, or perhaps even forgiveness. Tamara Pavlovna also arrived. She brought a huge bouquet and a bag of gifts, but she was not allowed into the ward. Quarantine. She conveyed everything through Kirill and left. The first months at home were pure hell. 3 babies who cried, ate, and soiled their diapers almost simultaneously. The nannies who worked in shifts were a great help, but the main burden still fell on Marina. Kirill, torn between 2 jobs, was more of a shadow than a real helper. But gradually, life got better. The children grew up, began to smile and coo. Marina, despite being tired, was happy. She looked at her babies and realized that she didn't regret anything. One evening, when the children were already asleep and the nanny had left, Kirill sat down next to her on the sofa. "Marish," he said quietly, "I can't do this anymore." "I'm quitting," Marina tensed up. "From what job? From both." He looked into her eyes. "I found another one. I was offered a position as a leading photographer at a large advertising agency with a good salary." Marina couldn't believe. Her ears. "How I collected all my old works, made a portfolio, and sent it out, and they hired me." There was pride in his voice. "I signed a contract today. The salary, in general, is enough for us to pay for nannies and everything else. I will be able to leave my night job and be home in the evenings. Help you." He took her hand. "I know I've been a terrible husband, and I'll probably never be able to fully make amends, but I want to try. For their sake." He nodded towards the nursery. "And for you. I love you, Marish. I only really understood this when I almost lost it." Marina looked at him, at this tired but mature man, and she realized that he was not lying. "I love you too," she said quietly. "A year has passed." Marina and Kirill's apartment resembled a bustling beehive. Laughter, crying, scattered toys, 2 babysitters fussing back and forth. Silence and order have left this house forever. But it was happy. Chaos. Kirill turned out to be a surprisingly good father. He happily played with the babies, changed diapers, bottle-fed them, and walked with a huge triple stroller in the park, drawing admiring glances from passers-by. Working in an advertising agency inspired him. He once again became the creative, passionate person that Marina had once fallen in love with. But now his creativity brought not only pleasure, but also a stable income. Marina, as planned, returned from maternity leave. She worked mostly from home, only occasionally going to the office for important meetings. She managed to save both her career and her family. It was incredibly difficult. She was exhausted, but she was happy. And what about it, Tamara Pavlovna? She became different, quiet, almost unnoticeable. She came once a week, always at a strictly agreed time, brought small gifts for her grandchildren, and sat quietly in the corner, afraid to disturb the order established by Marina. She no longer gave advice, criticized, or tried to. Command. The fear of losing her son and grandchildren proved stronger than her domineering nature. One day, when they were all celebrating the triplets' first birthday together, Tamara Pavlovna approached Marina as she stood alone on the balcony. "Marinochka," she said quietly, I wanted to really apologize. I was a terrible mother-in-law and a terrible mother. I almost ruined my son's life and yours." Marina looked at the lights of the night city. "I have forgiven you, Tamara Pavlovna," she said. And it was true. The resentment had long since gone. All that remained was a slight sadness about the lost time. We all make mistakes. The main thing is to realize them in time. "Thank you," whispered the mother-in-law. There were tears in her eyes. Kirill came up to them and hugged his wife and mother. "Why are you here? Without me?" He smiled. "It's time to cut the cake." They returned to the room where their friends were sitting at a large table, and on the floor, among balloons and toys, 3 identical toddlers were playing. Marina looked at her large, noisy, hectic family, at her grown-up husband, at her pacified mother-in-law, at her 3 children. And she thought that sometimes life presents the most unexpected surprises, and what at first seems like a catastrophe can ultimately turn out to be the greatest happiness. You just need to find the strength not to give up and make the world play by your rules. If you believe that even the most hopeless situation can lead to victory, like this story, share in the comments what you would do in Marina's shoes. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. After all, life is the best screenwriter, and it has many more incredible stories in store.